First of all, it is great to meet another Kenneth. You have a Y, I do not, but I have an extra E in Kenny because I go by Kenny.
Okay.
So it's great to meet you.
You as well.
Yeah, we've been chatting a bit back and forth for the past little bit, setting this up. And this is a good time for us to do this simply because you have a lot about to happen in
Yeah.
your world and lots to talk about, which is awesome. You're in LA, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
The weather good?
Yeah, it's quite warm, which is good. I grew up in Montana, so this time of year it's still kind of cold and blustery. So I revel in the LA sunshine.
We're out in Eastern Canada. We had snow the other day, some wet snow. That was fun.
I feel my pain. I feel your pain.
Every time I talk to somebody from LA, I always ask them about the weather because I just want to live vicariously through you until we get into some nice weather. Our springs are pretty wet and can be really damp and cold. So you've been doing this for a while. You're not new to music. For the past 5 years, you've been kind of what I would call zooming in and out of music, and I try to do good research into the artists and your backstory and your back catalog especially, and yours is really interesting because it comes from I don't know, there was, and you can correct me, please do. There was almost at the beginning back with it was the Unlock Your Heart single.
Mm-hmm.
That was back in, I think, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, it had the video, the Wizard of Oz type video with the
Mm-hmm.
Tin Man. That was the first thing I saw from you, which I was just like, oh, this is really, at that time when I first came across you, I hadn't seen a lot of artists from the LGBT community, especially creating videos of being authentically themselves. There was a lot of people who were kind of just out there, and they would mask it a bit, or they just wouldn't come at it directly, and yours is one of the first that I actually came across that I saw. So
Yay.
Two things. Wizard of Oz, first of all, and I guess the Unlock Your Heart thing is part of it. Second of all, the music itself was a little bit like a electro pop rock, but with a country tip to it.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you about the music, about where that came from, and the video.
So the song was written by this gentleman named Matt Hayes and his writing partner Aaron, who was the Scarecrow in the music video. And he had worked on this. He was doing it as a demo. He was recording and had Tiffany, from the 80s.
I think we're alone now. I think we're alone.
Yes, yeah. And so when I was putting the EP together, I was I needed another song, and I kind of hit shuffle on my little iPod at the time. I don't even think I had an iPhone yet. And it was the first one that popped up, and I was like, this would be kind of interesting. So I called Matt and asked if I could record it. And when I worked with the producer, Tony, I was like, I really like this country kind of feel. I want to keep that because that was, my roots growing up in Montana. And I said, but I want it to be something that people can move to, because at that point, like, Steve Grant hadn't come out or anything like that. So kind of a gay country kid would have been a little bit awkward. And so Tony was like, I think I can do what you want, and came up with the sound for Unlock Your Heart. And then my agent and a friend of his kind of created the story and the visuals for the video.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, Steve Grant hadn't come out then, and people were in the industry. They were doing it, and they're doing it their own way, but nobody had kind of really blatantly came out and said, well, I'm not going to come out doing music. I'm going to actually already be out. Which is, I guess, what we want to see, what we want to happen. But that first phase of it, was probably really scary and intimidating for a lot of artists. The country bit kind of surprised me when I was kind of going through the catalog. Because it was just, again, I shouldn't be shocked, but when I first kind of gotten and started doing this and started researching what was happening in, music out there with LGBT artists, I got a little surprised by just how much country there was, or country flavor that was being kind of peppered through. This is pre-Nas X, pre the Nas, but it was surprising. I shouldn't have been surprised because obviously everybody has their own tastes and whatnot, but I could see how some people would be intimidated to kind of come out. It's like in football, right? The football is like the sport nobody's gonna come out in football, or hockey. It's all right to be a diver, but it's one of those things. So that in rap music as well was the two areas that I looked at, and I was kind of like, wow, there's a lot happening here. So I was a little surprised when I first kind of came across it, but then kind of going through, because that was 2015, and then I think 2017 is when you had Real Me. Real Me and Rainbow Land, I think, kind of came out around the same year. And Real Me kind of still in the same vein a bit, but then you hit Rainbow Land and they started to take a bit of a turn, and got more towards the pop element, I would say, which brought you into 2019 and Holy Water. So there's been like a whole kind of progression, and I'm just curious, like that progression in music and writing and creating, and now having heard some of the music that's coming out next week, you've had a whole journey to get to where you are. And I think it's pretty interesting to look at, especially knowing, the community that you're part of, and growing as an artist. I think that, some people will go into, and you see this a lot with what I would, everybody calls bedroom pop boys, right? They're these young guys, and they steer really heavily into a very specific type of music, which is fine, because that's where they are and that's who they are, and they're young, and that's kind of what they're interested in. But with an artist like you, what we've seen, or what I've seen and taken from it, is that you had a progression of figuring out who you want to be as an artist, and it kind of unfolds through that music.
Yeah.
It's
a bit. So when the Fall Apart EP, like Unlock Your Heart, came out, it was very bright pop. People called it dance heavy, not dance heavy, but kind of dancey. And then I was having a conversation with a friend, and he was like, he's like, you're great for that, but he's like, you really wouldn't be able to do like acoustic-y kind of, singer-songwriter stuff, because I didn't really write anything on the album that Unlock Your Heart was on, which is Fall Apart. I kind of co-wrote one of the songs, but they were mostly all written for me.
Right.
And so then I turned around and did the Love EP, which is much more singer-songwriter, and I wrote almost every song on that album, which I was very proud of. It Was Love is one of my most favorite songs. It was my first song to debut on national radio, and it still gets played. I'll get messages from people back home whenever they hear it, and it's really kind of cool to have my sister Josie called me. She's like, the song came on the radio that I really liked it, and she's like, I Shazammed it, and it was you, and it was really cool. And so I was kind of a proud moment. And then, when Rainbow Land was a song that I grew up with, it was written by this woman named Lois Blaish, who wrote Could Have Been for Tiffany.
Wow.
And Rainbow Land was from the Rainbow Bright series, and I would play it all the time when I was a little kid at my grandmother's house. And when she passed away, I was like, it would be kind of a nice little tribute. And I recorded Rainbow Land and Real Me on the same day. Real Me was written for Maya Taylor, who was in the movie Tangerine. Oh. She was doing some stuff, and we became friends. And she was like, I want to do a song in this movie. And there was this whole big drama with the producers of the movie, and nothing ever happened. And Maya was like, well, I'm not going to record the song, but you should. And then it was funny because when Del Shores was doing A Very Sordid Wedding, I'm such a fan of his and of the Sordid Live television series and the film. It was the first gay film I'd ever seen. And so it's really special to me. And when Del was doing the film, he's like, I'd love to use a song of yours if we can come up with one. And I sent all of these finished perfect songs that I loved, and he didn't like any of them.
Oh.
And at that point, Maya was like, kind of gave me reel me back to me. And so I'm like, well, I kind of sent the demo to him, and that was, of course, the one he wanted. And so I rushed back in and recorded that with Rainbow Land, and then that came out. And it was really neat because I met Lois Blaish at a Tiffany concert. And I had walked up to her and I started talking to her about Rainbow Land, and she was so excited to talk about that song because she was kind of just given free rein to write whatever she wanted and kind of write like a lullaby for her daughter, she said. And so she was kind of excited when I said I wanted to do it. She was like, do it, please record it. And she absolutely loved it. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life, getting to have someone that wrote something that meant so much to me, talk about how much they like what I did to it. So
that's I mean, like, and again, that it's listening to the music, that there's a story there, that there's, it doesn't swing like that normally, right? Like, people don't go, I'm going to try this over here, and usually that there's a little bit more of a subtle, but there's a lot that's happening in your career, and that's what's I find really interesting, because now with what you have coming up, and you not only have a new single, but you have a full LP. I'm so used to saying EP at this point because so many people.
So am I. So.
So many people have left the LP behind, which I love.
Yeah.
I love a story from start to finish. I love a full LP, a full album if somebody has it to offer. I love the story behind it. I love how those things come about. So I'm excited that you have an actual album, like a full album. And from some of the snippets that you've kind of put out there, I think there is some. Is Rainbow Land on it?
Yeah, I did put Rainbow Land on the album. I wanted to include it because it was my technically my first full length. So I'm like, I have to include that song on there.
And I think it's an important song for you. Obviously, from what you just said, there's a lot of connectivity that's there with that song and a story. So it's kind of like that starting point for you, and to where you are now as an artist. And I have to say, there's a lot of retro.
Yes.
You have a lot of retro love. I have to say that it comes out in the music in a very different way. Some people automatically, you can kind of be like, oh my God, they're in love with Euro 90s or something like that. The retro that comes out in the music, and whether it's through the artwork, because for the new song that's coming out, which is You and Me.
Yes, You and Me.
It's You and Me. The artwork for it is very Jetson-esque.
Yes.
There's even a little picture of Astro in the back, like on a mantle, which I was just like, I love that because I grew up with that stuff. But in the music, it's more about really, to me, it's not necessarily about the sounds, it's about the feeling of that retro quality that's in there, where you can feel that it could have a place, say, in the 80s. But really, it fits so well with what's happening today in music. So it's a really nice blend. I'm assuming that retro feel is intentional, like that you are a fan.
Yes, well, because You and Me, a lot of the stuff in my career, as weird as this is going to sound, kind of goes back to Tiffany.
Right.
She was my first introduction to pop music. Her and Gem and the Holograms.
I was going to say your current logo, very Gem and the Holograms.
It is. It was supposed to be. So Star Stealer came about because I was working on an album of original songs. And then when COVID happened, like literally 3 days before we were going to start shooting the first video for the project, everything shut down. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to kind of half-ass anything. I want it to be good. So I kind of put that project on hold until next year, and then went to and did Star Stealer, which is the album of covers. And You and Me was a song that was originally featured in the Jetsons movie, and Tiffany had sang it, and I came across it because of the songwriter Stephen McClintock, and I kind of became friends, and I sent it to him just kind of as a just to kind of see, what he would think. And he called me the next day and was like, dude, he's like, this is really good. He's like, I'm very impressed. And he sent it to Tiff. He sent it to the other songwriter and the producer and the original producer, and they all loved it. So I went to Joe Phillips, who is an amazing comic book artist and artist. He's really well known in the queer community. And he had done the cover for a calendar a couple years ago, and I'd always loved it. And I was like, is there any possible way that I would maybe be able to use your artwork for the cover? And he has always been just the sweetest man to me, and gave it to me to use. And so I'm getting to tie everything that I love to that single with the throwback to the Jetsons and Tiff and everything. It's very fun for me.
That's I love the retro vibe that's there, especially in the artwork, because for someone like me, that becomes Easter eggs that I'm now hunting for, that I'm looking at, and I'm kind of like, what's going to be next, right? So when I first saw your Instagram photo, your avatar, I was kind of like, what? I was just like, that totally looks like, at first when I saw the pink, I was just like, is that Barbie? And I looked at the star, and I was kind of like, that's Gem and the Holograms. That has to be. And then when you showed me the artwork, and you sent over the link for You and I, and I was just like, Jetsons. I was just like, so now for somebody who's got like a nostalgia or nostalgic love for that material, and for the 80s and pop 80s, because I mean, I don't know if you know Rooks as an artist from the UK.
I've heard the name.
She talks a lot about how the 80s in pop was, what pop was all about. The fun, the sugary fun, Tiffany, New Kids on the Block, Debbie Gibson, oh my God, Electric Youth.
Yeah.
That world of pop was just so vibrant, and so it was just, it's not even that it was innocent, it was just so real. And there was just such a life to it. The other side of it was that pop that was a little bit rebellious, where we're going to break the rules, we're going to try different things, we're going to smash up different sounds together and create something new. And it was a real creative time. And that for me is what I'm hearing kind of coming through in that music, especially in You and I. And I'm kind of like, that is a really great, if anything, that is for anybody who's a fan of you or who's a fan of that music, that's a built-in almost thank you to anyone who still champions that, because they don't see it. And in some worlds, they almost kind of, talk it down a bit. It's like, oh, the 80s, everything was crazy. Everything was like garish. And it's like, yeah, but it was crazy. It was great. So it is almost like a bit of an audience thank you in a sense. And I hope people take that, and I hope people spend the time to kind of invest in hearing what's layered in there.
I hope so. That was kind of the plan. I grew up, a baby of the 80s and such a fan of that music, and every song that's on Star Stealer has some kind of connection to me that I grew up loving, whether it was, Rainbow Land with my grandmother, or Magic from Xanadu. I used to dance around on my roller skates, listening to that song, and, pretending I was Olivia Newton-John. And it was just, there's connections that if you know me, you're going to get it. The title Star Stealer of the album was taken from the Rainbow Bright movie from 1986. I spent a lot of time with my friend Renee and my friend Emily, kind of trying to decide what to call the album. I had all these funky ideas, and my cousin said some weird, like, deep kind of message. I'm like, no, these are just fun songs. And And Star Stealer came about because it just kind of fit. It's an album of covers, it's fun, it's weird, and so I kind of ran with that, and then started creating the artwork and kind of the visuals to go with it. I found a lot of old photos of me, from that time period, and I'm using those. And, I think We're Alone Now is going to be on the album, and a couple other songs that, if you know anything about me personally, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that's why this is on here. I remember him singing this in school, or even, as an artist talking about some of the other stuff, like, Selena and things like that. It's all, like you said, kind of little Easter eggs and I'm really excited about them all.
It was a great time. It was a great time
Yes.
period.
Oh yes.
It's such a fantastic place to pull from. And the more I think about it, being an album of covers, well, it's an album of covers for some people, but it will be an album of new material for a lot of people who are going to discover you. They won't necessarily get the tongue-in-cheek, and they won't necessarily get that retroness up front until they start listening to things like this. Some of them may not even know what Rainbow Land, like Rainbow Bright and all that kind of stuff was. They may not know who Tiffany was, but which is just like sacrilege. It's unfortunate, because I've said to people before that there was a freedom in the 80s and even into the early 90s that we don't necessarily have anymore. There's now a rigid construct that's in there that I hope does get broken down a little bit. I love it when I hear people go against the grain and, they're trying some different things. I know when I listen to it that I'm kind of like, this is awesome. The world is not going to get it, but that's fine. This is awesome. In years back, they can be super proud of this, of what they were doing at this time. And also the name Star Stealer reminds me of something that was also really prevalent at that time, which was Star Search.
Yes.
So it all comes full circle. It totally does. So as an album of covers, I guess, this is, and as an artist, this has got to be pretty personal for you, because there's personal where you write something and your emotions go into it. And then there's personal where it's kind of like you're paying homage to a time period of that was important to you, on, songs that were important to you, that meant something to you. Is there a mixture of, I guess, things of you growing up, as well as, moments in time, like things, I guess, like the Rainbow Land? How much of it is that emotional piece, and how much of it is just kind of like, that was just a great time?
It's pretty much all like I have emotional connections to all of them. I cannot sing a song unless I have some kind of connection to it. I've tried and have failed multiple times. I've done some covers that are the worst pieces of crap you're ever going to hear, so you never will. But
locked in the vault.
Like pretty much, and they were awful. But if it's something that I'm connected to, it's a lot easier for me to sing that. Like with, I think We're Alone Now, first 45 I ever owned. I played it so much that after my grandmother passed away, I went home for the funeral, and I was just kind of in my own head, of course, singing it, and my dad threw something at me from across the room and said, "It's been 30 freaking years. Choose a new damn song." And it was just one of those moments. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but he has had to hear it, forever, since it came out in 87.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And then, Is It the Beat from Selena was a song my friend and I would kind of dance to, because the song came out before the film, when she was still alive, obviously, right, back in like 89 or 90. And I remember it from then, dancing around to the record. And after she passed away, I always told a friend that if I ever did an album, I would put one of her songs on there. And I'm not dumb enough to try one of the Spanish songs, because I would be murdered. And so I chose that one. And like I said, everything kind of circles back to Tiffany, which is very, very weird, because the woman that wrote Is It the Beat has written several songs for Tiffany,
Yeah.
and is friends with Steven, and all of these people kind of connect. And like with Olivia Newton-John with Magic, she was part of the original Sorted Live movie and series, and then having Rio me in the movie, and it's just it little things like that. There's these little emotional connections that I hope people will, I mean, kind of take away. I'm hope that they like it, that they move to it, but then they're like, oh, this is because of this or that. And yeah.
I have to say I can't remember where it was. I haven't been very many places. So I was somewhere where I think it was just on the radio, maybe somewhere that I was walking in, and it stopped me dead in my tracks. And it was Olivia Newton-John's "You Have to Believe We Are Magic." And I literally stopped and out loud was kind of like, I completely forgot people forgot that. I can't believe people remember that song exists. Because for me, it was part of a whole time period and an album that was just so fantastic.
Oh yeah, that album is awesome.
And it was just so surprising to me because we've moved so far away from that sound that when I heard it, I was kind of like, instantly, it's kind of like memories, just kind of like flood you. And that's kind of the brilliant, to me, it's the brilliance of music too, that there's such an emotional connection with music, in music. Emotional connection in music for time periods that you resonate with, but at the same time, just to be able to kind of hear something like that and kind of go like, oh my God, Olivia, it's for a lot of people, it's like a Bonnie Tyler Total Eclipse of the Heart. But that song in that time period and Olivia Newton-John was such a massive star. But what else can we expect from the album?
There's a little bit of everything. I have 2 Belinda Carlisle songs, Leave It Light On For Me and Live Your Life Be Free. Yeah, Live Your Life Be Free is my favorite album of hers, and it was just such a fun song for me. And as a queer artist, because in the song she was singing to this guy like, you should be with me. The woman you're dating is, you're not very happy, so be with me and everything will be great. And I've not changed any of the lyrics or gender swapped anything, so I'm still singing to this guy that's very unhappy with this woman, and I'm like, hey, come over here, you should live your life how you want to live it. And so it kind of takes on a little bit of a different meaning, same meaning, but I guess just from a different perspective. And then Mickey,
Tony Basil.
Tony Basil Smith. Yeah. And that song I included because that was on the same album as Unlock Your Heart. And Alexis Arquette, when she heard Mickey, she freaked out. She loved it. And I got a phone call from her probably, I don't know, 3 hours after I sent her the album. And she was like, so I just want you to know that Tony really likes the song. And at first I was just like, who? And then she's like, oh, Tony Basil really likes, I'm like, you sent her my song? And so anytime I came over, anytime we were out, Alexis would play that song and we would dance around. And Alexis was such a bigger than life personality. And I would call and Alexis would be like, hello, this is, Alexis Arquette. And I'm like, hey, it's Kenny. And without me, be like, what's up? And it was just, I would die because it was, oh my God, Alexis could, whenever I was in a bad mood, I would call Alexis and within 15 seconds, I would feel better. And so I had to include that song because it was so important to her. And what else is on there? Big and Stupid from Julie Brown, which is just a hysterical song.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just funny as hell. And one of the few songs I performed live out here, and it's just hysterical. And what else is I'm trying to think of what else is on the album. Is it The Beat by Selena? I've got 3 other Tiffany songs, Kid on a Corner, and If Love Is Blind, and then You and Me, of course. So I've got 4 Tiffany songs on the album. And I don't even remember the songs on my album. I feel like such a bad person.
To jump back to Belinda Carlisle for a second, who is one of my all-time favorite artists. Belinda Carlisle got me through. People didn't understand why I was such a fan of Belinda Carlisle. And it wasn't the Go-Go's. It was Belinda. I love the Go-Go's.
Mm-hmm.
But Belinda Carlisle, when she kind of came out, you know, there was something about the music that she was doing. And you said Live Your Life, Be Free is, you know, one of your favorite. Also, as well, one of my favorite albums. I mean, you know, Runaway Horses, again, there was a lot between those two albums. There was so much that was going on in my life. That was my, I need to go for a drive, and I need a Belinda moment, because I could just sing and just release with Belinda. And it was just, and this is coming from somebody who typically was like, you know, putting in the Nine Inch Nails or Depeche Mode, you know, and that kind of thing. But Belinda was my savior. So what was interesting is that when I first kind of started doing this, I talked online a little bit with, you may know him, I don't know, Gabe Lopez.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, who works with Belinda and has, you know, played on tour with her for so long. And he and I were chatting about it now. It's like, if you're ever talking to her, just please let her know in Canada there's a young guy who just loves her to death. And he's like, oh, I'll let her know.
I actually recorded a song that Gabe wrote. It was one of the ones that I did really badly on. And so it'll never see the light of day. But Gabe has been a huge supporter and influence of me. And I knew Belinda's son, James, when he first moved out to California. He was going to college where I lived. And he didn't know how to drive at this point. And so I was teaching him how to drive. And he was he was on the phone with his mother. And he's like, oh, Kenny's going to take me driving. And I just heard, put him on the phone. Belinda goes, she's like, so you're gonna get in a car with James behind the wheel? And I said, yeah. And she's like, are you sure you want to do that? I'm like, I'm gonna be fine. Like, we'll be good. And she's like, okay. She's like, you know, you can't sue me, right? I was like, okay. I'm like, sure, whatever, it'll be whatever. And after we were done, I made him call her back and was like, thank you for trying to warn me. But it was just, I was on the phone talking to Belinda Carlisle about trying to teach her son how to drive. And it was super funny. And he too, you know, she's got the most recognizable voice, in my opinion, in pop music. Whenever
Definitely got one of them for sure.
Yeah. It just, you know, it's a Belinda song. And I own every one of her records. I own all of the reissues. And, you know, James has done a lot for the queer community. He's a very, very active voice, you know, trying for equality and things like that. And it's very, very commendable. And so, you know, and she just, I mean, there's video of me dancing around to Heaven is a Place on Earth and stuff like that as a really little kid. You know, I'm singing to like a plastic golf club, you know, pretending I'm her. And how my parents didn't realize I was gay at 3 years old is still beyond me. But but yeah, and Live Your Life, Be Free was just, there's not a song on that album, I think, that I could not relate to or you know, ever get tired of. I've listened to it probably 1 million times and I still love every single song.
It's yeah, again, I can totally concur. Even with Heaven is a Place on Earth and that album, my husband, the moment he hears that song, it's kind of like, and it's like, do not touch the radio, right? It's just, those are iconic songs. And I guess going back to the album, it's what I was hearing, and I, you know, hearing you talk about it, it makes sense that I was getting that from the music. So it's nice to see that, and I know I connected with it just from that kind of emotional resonance, I guess, right? Like that's carried through those songs. I can't wait to hear some of these songs, and I think it's going to be, yeah, for anybody who's a big fan of that time period and that music, it's going to be a real treat for us, because we don't see people go back and do that. very often. It's kind of like people have felt like we're gonna, kind of put that, that time period in a box. Maybe people are nervous. Maybe people feel that they can't, recapture the music, and it's not about recapturing it, that magic that's there. It's about honoring it, and understanding where it kind of comes from, and that shouldn't come with fear. And I mean, it should come with, like, come from a place of pride, I guess, right?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of one of the reasons why Star Stealer came about, is because we're in such a weird time. And after the original album I was working on when it was shelved, I was a little bit depressed about it, because I had gotten permission from Hasbro to use Gem and the Holograms. I was doing stuff with the original voices from the show, and getting a lot of fun animations and stuff put together. And so when it halted, I was really upset. I was really sad, because I've been working on this album since like 2015 or 2016. And so it's been a long, long time in coming. And then I kind of found myself listening to all of these older songs and how much better they made me feel. And I had recorded a lot of them over, the past 5 years since I started, and have never really had a project to fit a lot of them on. And I was like, this would be a good time to do it, just because nostalgia, there's a joy in it, and that it takes you back to a time that was much less confusing, much happier. And I'm hoping that these songs will be able to do that for people. Kind of like I said, some of the people listening, or they're never going to have heard some of these original songs, and mine are different enough that you can tell I'm not trying to copy. Like you said, I'm kind of paying homage to them, and I'm hoping that people will get that same sense of joy that I did from Belinda and Tiffany and Reba McEntire and all these amazing artists that have brought so much joy.
Reba.
I'm excited. There's the cover of Does He Love You? I sing it with Brendan Velasquez, who's another queer artist. And
Sorry, with who?
Brendan Velasquez.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you're doing the whole Reba, Linda.
Yes, exactly.
But two men.
Yes.
That's effing
and I'm so excited, because we have been wanting to release the song. I recorded it back when I recorded Unlock Your Heart, so 2000 and probably 13, 14, when I was recording that EP, and we've never been able to do it. And Brendan's manager Raymond had the funniest idea for a video, and I'm like, I want to put this out, because I need people to hear the song. It's so funny. And I hope that we get to do, there's a remix we want to do a video for, and I hope that when everything lifts, we'll be able to do it, because Raymond has this very, very similar to the original Reba video. And there's a scene where she's got this white turban kind of hat cape thing, and he has it. I don't think it's her original one, but he has it, and he's like, you're going to wear it in the video. And this whole concept was so funny. And it's such a fun song. And it does, Brendan and I play very well off of each other. And there's a remix of the song that we'll use for the video. That's us fighting over the guy. And there's a part where Brendan goes, he doesn't love you, bitch. And it's so flippin' funny. And it was one of those things where we had so much fun recording it, and I'm really excited for people to hear this version, and hopefully the future one as well. It'll be fun.
Well, and the original with Linda Davis and Reba McEntire was so dramatic. And then on the stage, right?
Like car blowing up.
And there's sequence for days when they meet on the stage, and like there's just this whole passion, a dramatic passion. Country music.
Yeah, exactly. 90s country music was so dramatic. And those two, and because Raymond, I think he worked with Reba, if I remember correctly. He's connected to her in some way. And so it was his idea to do that particular song. And that video, I remember as a kid when like the boat blows up at the end, and then it pans out and you see that they're filming the video, and it was he wanted to get Coco Peru and blow things. That he wanted to do a very like sweepingly gay version of that video,
Right.
and which would just be so fun and funny. And I told him, I said I would wear that stupid big hat and
Yeah.
a cape, and I said I will whatever. I said I just think it's going to be hysterical, so I will do whatever you want me to do this song.
Another song that's similar to that would be very cool to see two men do would be Brandy's and
The
Monica.
Boy Is
The Boy Is
Mine.
Mine.
Yeah,
I'm like, that would be also very.
that would be fun. I remember that song in school, and I loved that song. My cousin and I would always, you know, we were, God, we were teenagers, and we would sing it because we all thought that her boyfriend was gay.
Right.
And so anytime it would come on, we would play off of each other, and I'd be like, oh no, he's going to be gay, and it's going to be da 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 da. And yeah, I was that weird kid in school.
There were a lot of us.
Yes, and I embraced it. I came out when I was probably 13 or 14. Started the process, and then, you know, officially by 15 I was like, whatever, I'm here, I'm queer. If you don't like it, you know, screw you. I really don't care. And I was in a tiny little town in Montana, and you would think that it would have been a hellacious experience, and it was not. It was a very good experience. I never felt threatened. I never felt afraid. I'd also never really denied it. You know, I had Rainbow Bright and Gem and the Holograms t-shirts, and I listened to Tiffany for, you know, goodness sake, you know, people didn't realize I was gay there. That was on them.
But I think that was a time too where people, they didn't challenge it. They didn't really know how to embrace it or not, or what it was. And I think that it was just kind of like, okay, so we'll just park that for now and whatnot. And that's cool. And we'll get to it at some point in time. It seemed to be the 90s, especially the late 90s, is when it really, every time you turned around and you heard a coming out story, it was more aggressive. It was more, just, there was so much involved with it, and it was always negative. And when there was a positive story, it was kind of like hallelujah. But it was such an upheaval. But in the 80s, it was kind of like, how do you know? How do you tell? You know, if John walks in with the flock of seagulls hair, what does that really mean? You had Boy George, who presented very, very differently, with makeup, with the hair and everything, but was called Boy George. It was a bit of a sex symbol for people crushing on him. You had George Michael.
George Michael.
Elton was there. There was so much queer happening in the 80s that I just think that people just didn't know what was music, what was fashion, what was queer, what wasn't, what was.
Totally. And it was in the 80s, and nobody seemed to really care. I mean, George Michael, he said in an interview once that he never really felt the need to come out because he never really hid who he was. And looking at some of his stuff back then, the Wake Me Up Before You Go, and I remember as a kid my mom talking about how cute he was, and as an adult rewatching that video with her, I was like, how did you not know? Like, I'm like, look at him. Like, he was
Club
so
Tropicana, that's all I'll say. If you go to Wham and Club Tropicana, that's all I'll say.
I was stunned. And, Belinda said in an interview, like when James came out to her, she was like, of course I'd have a gay kid. She's like, I'm me, of course. and you have such, and people like her, that are such queer icons, even though she herself is not queer. But it's a lot of those, those 80s power women. Tiff is very active with the gay community. So is Debbie Gibson, Tony Basil, and all of them are such huge supporters. And I think, with Star Stealer, all of the songs on the album were originally sung by women. It's just, they were who I gravitated towards as a kid. They were who I related to. My agent for years was like, you can totally tell that Tiffany was one of your idols because I'll do the head turn, you know, and things when I'm doing music, which was a very hard thing to unlearn because I didn't even know I did it. My first video, Fall Apart, was very much that 80s, you know, turn to the camera.
Yeah.
And it was something that was very difficult to unlearn. But the women power in the 80s was so big, you know, Madonna and you know, all of them. It's still something that I relate to. I think I've grown up around strong women. I love, you know, strong women, and it's, so I'm hoping that, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm hoping that with the album, people kind of get that I'm paying homage and hopefully not trying to take anything away from these amazing women. It's just me basically saying thank you to them for, you know, basically writing or singing the soundtrack to my life.